There are several discussions regarding Atlantis being Santorini. Now you have your own opinion on whether Santorini is Atlantis. You can make a judgment on the following information, but all the information fits under three key headings: geography, history, and science.
There is more detail under those headings, but I'll also be explaining the natural hazards of why we can't find Atlantis today. I am relying on several information sources, but I'll be delving deep into the information given by Plato's dialogues, Critias and Timaeus. I'll also mention the likeliness of the tsunamis wiping out the Minoan civilization that we now call Atlantis. It all comes down to the two laws of stratigraphy, the law of superposition and the law of cross-cutting. The first law, the law of superposition, just says that the rocks at the bottom of the stack are the oldest, and as you get higher, the rocks get younger and newer. The second law, the law of cross-cutting, just says that if there is an intrusion of another kind of rock, for example, if conglomerate intruded on, let's say, some layers of fossils and shale, that helps us figure out how long the intrusion has been occurring and when did the intrusion start. Based on the information from the laws of stratigraphy, 70 feet of pumice and ash were found and dated approximately 12,000 years before Plato's time. That information does link Santorini to be Atlantis, based on the eruption of the volcano laying down the ash and finding a lost civilization.
Just looking at scientific research on the Atlantic Massif, some rocks and minerals were found down below the sea, but some were less dense enough to float up to the surface and travel inshore. Some rocks reached as far as Crete. For example, pumice. Even today, pumice is washed up on the shores of Crete and Santorini. The exploration for a sunken massif consists of several types of basaltic rocks and various minerals. These are called peridotites, which is made up of about 60% olivine mineral, haspigite, which is like peridotites but has a mineral in it called diopside. Some other types of rock include serpentinite and gabbros. Gabbros is one of those rocks that isn't that dense, so some of it will break up and float, but some will sink until it hits the bottom.
In Plato's dialogues, he talks about Atlantis. When he does refer to Atlantis, the description he talks about is a lot similar to Santorini. He describes that it is being an oblong shape, much like a squash football field or an athletics track, but obviously the oblong is a lot bigger. Plato got the information from a highly regarded poet and lawmaker, Solon. Solon was on an expedition that led him to an Egyptian town that led him to meet some priests that told him about the story of Atlantis. I see this as being reliable information despite it being passed down through generations. We can still link right back to Plato's description of Atlantis.
The Minoan society was an Aegean Bronze Age civilization that was located on the island of Crete and other Aegean islands. The civilization thrived between 2000 BC and 1500 BC. The word Minoan refers to the Greek myth king Minos. It was a special civilization with their unique art and architecture, helping the development of Western Europe civilization as it is known today. It was one of the most advanced civilizations at the time. The Minoans had big palaces which were used for control and trade. They were also used for storage of wine, oil, grain, precious metals, and ceramics. These palaces were usually 2 or 3 stories high. The volcanic eruption during the time of the Minoan people was one of the biggest volcanoes of all time. It was a category 6 to 7 volcano. No one survived, but even if some did flee, the volcano would still get to them with the ash cloud forming, rocks spitting out of the volcano, and also the acid rain. These causes would majorly affect the city and people trying to flee it. The whole entire Mediterranean Sea would have been shattered. It would have been affected by a tsunami or even an earthquake because of the magnitude of the volcano.
Santorini is placed on the base of a fault line on the Aegean plate and the African plate. When these collide, it causes a convergent plate boundary. From this it causes subduction, so earthquakes will occur. But, when a divergent plate boundary and there is less subduction, magma rises from the asthenosphere to the lithosphere, where it penetrates the crust and causes mass destruction by unleashing a volcano. After the subduction has occurred, a trench is formed where the Earth has banked up around the crust. Based purely off scientific research at the moment, we can park Plato's dialogues for the moment. It is very possible that this series of natural hazards have occurred.
Earthquakes aren't as in this as the volcanoes and the tsunamis, but they did cause havoc to the Minoan civilization. The whole sewage system was wrecked, the houses were destroyed, some people were killed. Despite the earthquakes not killing too many people, they were the causing of the tsunamis to be so powerful. The earthquakes that hit Atlantis were apparently rated about 11.6 on the Richter scale, which is just bad enough to cause great subduction for the Minoan civilization and cause great floods amid by the earthquakes.
The location of Atlantis hasn't been confirmed, but based off Plato's dialogues it is in the Mediterranean Sea just north of Crete. The shape of Atlantis is another thing. What Plato describes to be the shape of Atlantis matches up with the shape of Santorini. Here is what it said in Plato's dialogue, Critias. It was for the most part rectangular and oblong, and where falling out of the straight line followed the circular ditch. The depth, and width, and length of this ditch were incredible, and gave the impression that a work of such extent, in addition to so many others, could never have been artificial. Nevertheless, I must say what I was told. It was excavated to the depth of 100 feet.
Tsunamis were the reason that we can't find the lost realm of Atlantis today, but we can work off some information and dates that we have gotten from the tectonic plate boundaries, fault lines, and earthquakes. It was thought that there were a few earthquakes in the ocean provoking tsunamis that not only hit Santorini, but Crete as well. There was obviously a divergent plate boundary causing earthquakes and unleashing magma on Atlantis as well, which was how the genocide occurred over the Minoan civilization. From the tsunamis, then to the flooding crops, which killed livestock and crops. The floods almost covered Atlantis in a possible few weeks. Now there is nothing but a patch of blue sea like any other, but below that patch of blue sea lies about 20 metres of ash and pumicite covering the Atlantis massif. Below all that ash and pumicite lies sandstone and limestone, what has any of that got to do with Atlantis? Well, that is what they used to build their houses with.
The volcano killed hundreds of people and impacted thousands. It started the acid lava volcano with ash. By this point, the Minoans were feeling the impact by the ash closing up their lungs and tightening up their throat. After the ash, the pyroclastic flow and lava started wiping out the trees, people, and houses. The pyroclastic flow travels a few hundred kilometers per hour, with the densest of gases knocking over trees and limestone walls like toothpicks and paper. By the point of the lava flow, people were trying to escape Atlantis. A good job they were doing too, but not good enough for the pyroclastic flow, which hit them in a few minutes from exiting Oblong. Concluding the information that we have gathered from various sources, Atlantis did exist. There was a dystopian society in the Mediterranean Sea that was wiped out by a huge ash volcano. Over time, floods have occurred and tsunamis have hit, sinking Atlantis into the ocean.
There are now a few common misconceptions, but when you analyse the information and the data, you can see that it matches up with the characteristics of Santorini, an island off Crete in the Mediterranean Sea.
And when did the intrusion start? Based on the information from the laws of stratigraphy, 70 feet